Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Spin It Reviews, and today, only a week into 2017, I'm going to be doing my second list for 2016. Now, normally the past couple years on this channel, I would have saved this for my top 5 worst or most disappointing albums of the year, which is admittedly always a fun video to make. However, 2016 has actually been a really light year in terms of letdowns. Like, if I had to make a top 5 right now, it'd be some combination of Gwen Stefani, Drake, Block Party, Bruno Mars, Bon Jovi, but, 3 of those I kind of already expected to be not that good in the first place. You wouldn't really get a rant on the same caliber as what I did last year with Speedballs of Heaven or something like that. But just so happens that something that I did get a bit of an appreciation for over the course of 2016 was EPs. Like, in years prior, I probably would have brushed off a new release that an artist was doing if it happened to be an EP instead of a full-length album, because, I don't know, it just didn't feel like as much of a statement to me or something, and that's maybe the case a lot of the time still, but I still made sure to give those more the time of day, especially since, they're not that much of a time commitment in the first place. So I figured I'd do a little unscripted list with some notes here and there, sort of going through some honorable mentions, which I'm giving a little more leeway to have more of them since, they tend to, throw them out there more so than albums, so it only seems right to do it here. You had some local acts dropping some solid sets of tracks like Jake Lobin, a few unknown friends of mine actually, like Johnny, who you may know as my co-host on Mad Sounds. He put out his debut EP with some odds and ends on Bandcamp, which I definitely recommend. And my friend Cristian Marcella, who you may know from my Journey review reaction thing from a few months ago. He put out his first foray into electronic music, and it's definitely worth checking out in my opinion. I've also found EPs can be a nice little outlet to get out some one-off experimentation, for better or worse, or in the worst case, just farting out a few tracks to get something out there to keep your name relevant for a few months. Damn it, Strokes, I defended Come Down Machine. Also, it just so happens that all the EPs I reviewed over the course this year just barely missed the cut for this list, which I'm kind of glad for, honestly, since I just wanted to talk about 5 I haven't talked about in past videos. And also, I just want to give a quick shout out to Stick to Your Guns, who put out a set of solid tracks too. Just didn't really fit into any of their categories I was talking about. Anyway, let's move on to the list, and keep in mind that my favorite track from each of these EPs is going to be playing in the background as well as being linked in the description, so let's get started with this. And at number 5, we have Holy Child's America Oil Lamb. So this is a pop duo I got into in late 2015 when they're opening for Rin Weaver, when I was introduced to the whole crazy kind of image they have going on. These pop songs that have kind of obnoxious characteristics to them, but you can tell it's intentional, and it's also mixed with these kind of biting and sharp lyrics about gender politics and other stuff that you wouldn't really expect to creep into songs that sound like this in the way they do, and that are also really well produced for what they're going for. I thought their album from 2015, The Shape of Brat Pop to Come, was really solid, and this is a nice little attachment to that. It basically shows them collaborating with a lot of other indie pop musicians in their whole world, such as RAC, Kate Nash, Miss Mister, among others. And going back to those lyrical themes, it definitely puts a lot more of them up to the forefront. In the case of especially tracks like Power Play and Rotten Teeth, those are probably my 2 favorites on here. They happen to be the 2 singles, which is pretty nice. And again, I just love the contrast between these super sugary but also slightly off-kilter hooks mixed with the more complex topics that they're talking about. It never really comes off as gimmicky, or at least not gimmicky in a way that's a turn-off, in my opinion. And number 4 is probably the most unknown EP on this list. It's Thrill Bill's Stumphead. So this is a band that actually messaged me on Facebook, their drummer did anyway, and I don't normally take requests or respond to, listen to my band stuff, not because I think I'm above it, but I already have so much on my plate that I can't really take the time, honestly. That sounds super pompous, but it's just the truth. But kind of on the whim, I thought, I'll give this a shot. It's an EP, and he seemed like a genuine fan of the channel as opposed to, spamming it around to every review channel they can find. So I decided to give this thing a listen, and if you're looking for a good hard rock fix in the last year or so, then this is definitely a good place to go to. I'm actually, instead of describing it any further, I'm just gonna read the little message I sent back to him because he was basically asking for thoughts and feedback on it more than actual publicity, which again, I really appreciate. Okay, I think this is a really solid EP. First off, the rhythm section is fantastic, and I swear I'm not saying this just because you're the drummer, haha. Really forceful at driving those straightforward grooves. Production helps with that too, very crisp, especially for a relatively unknown band. Some awesome guitar solos too that can get really face-melting, but generally stay melodic. Similar compliments can be given to some of the really creative bass lines. I can tell there's a lot of musicianship on display here. As far as gripes, I didn't really find many of these songs all that catchy or anything that really sticks in the brain, though that could change with repeated listens, and it kind of has. I think part of it is that a lot of the melodic structures and instrumental tones are very similar. Now, for this style, it's not inherently a bad thing. It is classic hard rock, after all. By contrast, probably my favorite track here, Naked Splendor, is more exciting in my opinion, since it mixes those higher guitar leads and hyperactive 16th note drum beats, along with those explosive hard rock and metal elements in the last half. Kind of feels like the lost 2005 collab between Queens of the Stone Age and Block Party, with maybe Eddie Vedder coming in to join the party. I can't say too much about the lyrics since I don't have them in front of me, but nothing seemed objectionable. Again, very good EP overall. And favorite tracks are listed here. Naked Splendor, again, Fleece has an awesome bass line. And I know I kind of mentioned a couple of gripes in that, but you know, when they're asking for feedback, you kind of want to give a compliment sandwich, if you will. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this as an upcoming band that I can definitely see a lot of potential in. And at number 3, we have Aesop Rock and Homeboy Sandman, Lice 2, Still Buggin'. Basically, this is the sequel to an EP that came out like a year or two ago that I still haven't listened to, but it was also a collab between these two rappers, Aesop Rock, Homeboy Sandman, and I think they actually work really well together. You could maybe call this Aesop's Run the Jewels, but you know, the comparisons are far off enough that I wouldn't really directly pit those two against each other, you know what I mean? This seems a lot more small scale for sure, especially since Aesop already put out an album this year that, spoiler alert, I'm going to be going a little more into at some point over the next week. But anyway, this EP basically features these two not really going into anything too deep, but just trading off bar after bar and verse after verse, while Homeboy Sandman, who I was introduced to through this EP, isn't quite on the same verbose and extremely dense level as Aesop. He still definitely has a lot of those characteristics and a lot of the same appeal. His voice, to me, takes a little bit of getting used to, but again, he's definitely got a similar dense, clever style that I can definitely appreciate, and it doesn't really drag the EP down in any way. It's just that I tend to be more of a fan of Aesop coming out of it. Something I also really have to commend, and I know Aesop didn't produce all the beats on this like he did on The Impossible Kid and Skeleton, but the beats and the production on the last two tracks, Mud and Stop the Bleeding, are absolutely brilliant. With the noodling guitar loop going on Mud, and the way that especially Aesop is like weaving his way around it with his flow and rhyme scheme is genius. And especially Stop the Bleeding, that song's convinced me so hard that more rappers need to sample and rap over psychedelic rock, because oh my god, the groove on this is phenomenal. But that's what I wanted to say for this. It's just a nice little free project that was dropped on Bandcamp that's definitely worth checking out if you are a fan in any capacity of either of these two, or just good rhymes in general. And at number 2, we have Will Haynes, Tunnel Vision. So this is the third YouTuber foray into music that I've talked about for 2016, and it's probably the best, honestly, even though the other two I've talked about were also pretty good. For those who don't know, William Haynes, best known as a host on People Be Like, which is sort of affiliated with SourceFed. He used to host on there too, and this is his first, he's calling it a mixtape, but you know, it's not really a full length. It's confusing with the formats on these hip-hop things nowadays, but honestly, I shouldn't be as surprised that he works really well as a charismatic rapper as he does on this thing. Like, he's always had a kind of magnetic inflection to the way he talks, and it carries over actually pretty naturally on here. You may find a flubbed rhyme or two, but you know, it just kind of comes with a debut project, and I can kind of overlook that, especially with the general lyrical themes going throughout this. The idea of getting really caught up in your dreams and aspirations, and just finding that you're alienating the people around you who feel like you've changed too much, and stuff like that. that. But the key thing that he does here that I really have to commend him on is that he never comes off defensive about it. Maybe he's throwing shots at someone here and there for sort of turning their back, but he always comes off very understanding, even when he's condemning them at the same time. It's very tactfully handled. And there is a certain falling out, a certain beef that's being rumored, that the last track's being directed towards someone. I don't want to get caught up in all that, but the point is, either way, that this is a really fun, thoughtful, and just really well-crafted hip-hop project, and I'm really looking forward to what he has to do next, honestly. This isn't the kind of, like, YouTuber going into music where it's like, oh, this one-off thing, I'm so glad you did that. No, I kind of want him to pursue this a bit more. Maybe not to the point where it gets in the way of people be like, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm really interested in what he has to do next. I'm rambling, let's move on. And now, number 1. So, this is the kind of record that makes me so glad I don't just release these lists at the beginning of December like a lot of publications and channels do, because December has become like this weird breeding ground for these surprise releases that come around and smack everyone in the face, and this has been mine this year. I listened to it just a couple days ago just because I figured it might go on a list like this, and oh my god, it just completely blew me away. 9 Inch Nails, not the actual events. So I'm not going to claim to be the most hardcore 9 Inch Nails fan, but I've listened to most of Trent's albums under this name, and I'm a fan of a lot of them, especially, you know, Downward Spiral, With Teeth, and I thought Hesitation Marks from 2013 was a pretty solid record. But out of what I've heard, like, even 25 plus years into his career, this is some of the most disgusting, noisy, like, disturbed, like, stuff that I've heard him do, and apparently this kind of calls back to the film scores he's been doing the last few years. I'm not really that familiar with any of them outside of having seen The Social Network. Basically, from what I'm gathering in like the press surrounding this thing and how they described it, and in the structure of this thing, from what I'm gathering, this is a story being followed, switching from character to character about abduction and abuse, just torture and like murder, and I really don't want to go too deep into the story because I don't want to spoil the twists and turns that happen, especially in the last 3 tracks. Like, She's Gone Away and Burning Bright have to be the 2 most unsettling songs I've heard all year. And the imagery in these songs, like, it's not even just grotesque imagery for the sake of being grotesque, like you find in some death metal or horrorcore or something like that. No, what I mean is that this contributes to a story that has these kind of horrifying revelations toward the end about who the character that it follows becomes and how his mind sort of warps over it. And again, the fact that Trent and now Atticus are taking this many risks as far as the concepts and everything like that, it kind of proves that this isn't like some, you know, person that used to innovate that now is just kind of rehashing it for the nostalgia crowd. No, he's pushing the boundaries, and there's probably more abrasive industrial stuff. I'm very aware of that. 9 Inch Nails has kind of been described as an entry-level thing in that kind of genre, I guess. I don't really know, but this is some, again, fantastic stuff, and especially Trent's delivery, where he's buried under the mix and he's warping his like kind of quiet spoken word thing. It just elevates this material to this just raw and thing where it's not corrupted by having to provide this hook or anything. Just what's going on in the song alone is enough to hook you in, even when it goes on for like 6 minutes or so. I'm rambling on this, but it's for good reasons as opposed to for the other two. If I had to have a complaint, it might have benefited if it was a full-length album, but that just shows like this is a complete EP. It's just stuffed with ideas and does not feel like just something they put out to get his name out there, since it's been 3 years since his last 9 Inch Nails project. This was a very inspired thing that I'm so glad is out there in the world. And that is my list of my top 5 EPs of 2016. I'm probably going to record a video right after this, my top 5 movies. Would highly recommend looking at that. And yeah, if you have any thoughts on any of these EPs, have any favorite EPs I didn't mention, if you want to put those in the comments, I would gladly hear about that. And I'll be linking a song from each of these in the description. And yeah, thank you for watching. Bye. like, some of his inflections feel a little bit off, especially in, like, that one line of, I think, Zilch, where he's going, like, you, do. It was just, like, some weird inflection like that. I was going to keep this video short, like an EP, but now it's turning into views. The views of my channel are going down every day.